All right, everybody. It is time for another Game Developer Roundtable cast here on the channel. As always, each month, myself along with our panel here will discuss a topic regarding game design and the industry itself. And we got a very interesting one lined up this month. We're going to be talking about the impact of video games and what it means to play them both positively and negatively. So I'm sure this won't get any too controversial, especially with our panel here tonight. But as always, I'm going to give everybody a chance to go around and introduce themselves. So, of course, I am Josh Blazer from Game Wisdom, and I guess I am the host for this discussion. So we'll go with Tomo, Ramin, and then Shark.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tomo Moriwaki. I'm a co-founder of a small dev studio called Hyperkinetic Studios, and we're working on a game that's in Steam Early Access called Epic Tavern. I've been making games for a long time, something like 24-ish years, mostly as a designer.
My name is Ramin Shokrizad. I'm a game neuroeconomist. I'm a co-founder of a new studio called Cloudwalker. We're making science-based games that are designed to make people feel safer and more connected to other players.
I'm Sharky. I'm co-founder I'm the founder of Nexus Games, and I'm known for pretty much nothing but cutting her up around this, on this channel. But hopefully, I'll be known for something really big here in a year or two.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll be getting a lot more updates because we don't ever talk, right, Sharky?
No, we've never talked before, not even once.
But our topic tonight is an interesting one, as we're going to be discussing kind of the impact of what it means to play video games and kind of what the actual impact it is over the world. And there is certainly a lot to break down with this, both positively and negatively. Just notice that my camera's super zoomed in there. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, that's a little bit better. But I won't have too big of a head, right, Shark?
It's too late for that.
But there's certainly a lot of where we can start for this kind of discussion. So I think, as always, let's start on the positive side, and then we'll kind of get negative in a few minutes. So this is a discussion I know Rami and I, we've talked about kind of how video games impact people from a neurological standpoint many times. And I guess when it comes to playing these video games, or even just the idea of sitting down, for our group here, do you think it has been, I think I know the answer to, but I think this is going to start with, do you think it has been largely a positive experience, the impact of video games on society over, at this point, we could probably say over the last 40 years? And if anyone wants to start, feel free.
I'll start, sure. I think that generally the impact has been quite positive. I do think that as any entertainment medium runs the risk of doing, it does to some extent also spread some, maybe we'll call them suboptimal messages, because our entertainment channels are very effective, and so, but more often than not, they're really, and the negativity that comes through them is usually just a mirror of our own problems.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that our industry started, I think, as an impact wise, maybe not, inside the industry, since I wasn't inside the industry, but I know as an impact wise, I think it started way more pure kind of thing. And I think over time it's gotten worse, but it's also gotten better at the same time, because it's gotten better, you see a lot of improvements kind of thing in the indie space kind of thing, and you see a lot of that downward spiral kind of in the AAA space. But that doesn't mean all AAAs are bad or that all indies are good. It's just the general kind of trend you see.
I would say that if you go back a few decades, entertainment. I don't see entertainment as a luxury. I see entertainment as a need, and entertainment is like the counter to our stress. And as the world gets more stressful, our consumer demand for entertainment goes up, and it's been going up quite a bit. Especially, Tomo, show them your cup.
Yeah, the joke is, this mug became outdated rather quickly.
So I mean, that presents an opportunity for us, and you can see how music and movies used to be two of the primary forms of entertainment, and games just eclipse those very rapidly, which to me indicates that we're better able to meet those needs or at a lower price point than those other forms of just passive media. Interactive media is way more powerful and way more effective at giving the consumer whatever they're looking for. Though I think the problem with our industry in this regard is that increasingly, instead of giving the consumers what they want, we've been giving them what we want. And there's a lot we can say about that, but I'm going to yield at that point.
Yeah, and we'll probably be coming back to that in the next few minutes, especially when we get to the negative side. But yeah, I would agree with everyone about this. I made a post last year talking about the impact of video games on my life. And as somebody who was born with several physical defects in my right leg, I'd have surgery for it. It left me with a lot of chronic pain. And I've certainly used video games as a way to deal with that pain, just concentrate away from that. And over the last decade, I think in particular, it's become my thing. I've kind of catched up with this idea of, the social interaction that comes with video games that we've spoken about before when it came to the rise of the MMO genre in the late 90s into the thousands, where a lot of people, there's that stigma that video games are, just for, the antisocial losers who, live, just stay in a cave all day. But video games have been, I think, very pivotal for a lot of people, including myself, in being able to talk to people, being able to reach out, and just being able to, I think, understand the world better than I could have otherwise. And again, I know I'm not the only one who feels that way, especially among a lot of people out there.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many stories like that, and I do think that, along with the rise of the internet and really the kind of dramatic improvement to the whole world's connectivity to itself, comes kind of a new vector to build culture, right? And our digital play entertainment experiences with each other makes us more like each other than like the people we grew up with.
And to Warry's comment, that is definitely one of the more interesting aspects about how video games can also push people apart when you're dealing with those who don't understand versus those who do. I know we had this discussion before, my family thinks all I do every day is just sit here and play video games. That I have the luxury of playing.
You mean you don't?
Yeah, I wish. With all the book writing, video editing, and other stuff. That I just play video games 10 hours a day.
Come on, we know the truth, Josh. You've just been sitting there playing video games this entire time. That's all you've done.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't fool us.
We know you don't sleep 8 hours. Where did the other 8 hours?
Yeah, that's right. I found a way to add 10 more hours a day.
I mean, our joking around like this is totally evidence of what you're saying, by the way.
Yes. And I think one of the more fascinating things about kind of the rise of the positive side has been, I think, this just overwhelming acceptance of video games and video game culture. And for me, I think that really started to take root in the 2000s. And I think it completely just took over the last decade. And again, I remember growing up when video games are considered this cheap little fad that nobody was ever going to be interested in. Why play video games? And today we are seeing everything from the benefits mentally and socially esports, colleges and schools having video game clubs. A lot of the libraries I've reached out to, like all over the United States, have video game clubs where they let their teens like get together and spend afternoons playing video games and enjoying their own time. So it has certainly gotten a lot better there.
Or degree programs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Again, like I've said the story at my college, the year after I graduated, that's when I decided at the video game design course. When during my whole time there, they were saying, "Oh, you're going to be the last class who does anything computer programming. We're never going to do anything more with that again." And then a year later, oh, we have a game design course now.
So did you need to go back to school the second you got out?
Yeah, probably. That get double the school loans. That's a real life hardcore difficulty right there. Get double school loans.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, yeah. Hopefully we can change that structure at some point in the future.
Yes. And to board fans' comment, MMOs are becoming more antisocial, and I think this is a discussion I know Rami and we've had several times about how so much has changed in terms of like the social space of playing these video games, and this is where I think we can easily segue into some of the negatives, because it seems like while there's been a huge push positively, there are still some negative aspects. I know we've had discussions, or there have been discussions about people harassing those online, what it means to be a woman playing video games or being in the game industry, or even just being a minority in the industry as well.
It seems like video games brought the positives, and then the internet brought the negatives, and then when the two merged kind of thing, everything got mixed.
Mm-hmm.
Bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think this is a question I want to ask you, Ramin. Again, with the whole social side thing, especially with mobile games and so on, that why do you think we haven't really seen that big of I think the positives of like the social side of mobile games? Because we've spoken before about how a lot of mobile games tend to exploit the sociability of people. Forcing into guilds. Force interaction day to day, etc., etc.
Well, I've got a lot to say on the subject, obviously. I'd say that, first of all, there's in interactive media, there's two main things that games can provide to consumers. They can make things more exciting for you if you're bored, or they can relax you if you're stressed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the game will do both, but alternate between the two, which I think it works out best. And I think originally games were mostly there to provide excitement, not so much for relaxation. And we found that if we stressed players enough, or even threatened them, we could get them to spend more. And as soon as we figured that out, and you see this like in the 2014 South Park freemium isn't free episode, which it was very similar to a paper I wrote the previous year called "Free is Getting Very Expensive." By threatening players, you can kind of get them to spend more. And then once developers figured this out, they all started copying this model. And pretty soon we found, especially on mobile, that these games were actually very stressful to play by design. And as per Tomo's Cup, the world's getting much more stressful. So boredom is becoming less and less our problem, and stress is becoming more and more our problem. So really, I think more now we need games that reduce our stress. But the industry went so 100% in on games that increase your stress, and they're not really adapting to the change in consumer needs. They're maybe adapted to what they perceived as consumer needs 10 years ago. As Sharky points out, the indie space is getting better at adapting to this because they're more agile than maybe these bigger players are.
Yeah.
I'll stop there, even though I could go on.
Well, and they kind of have no choice, right? I think if you want to see what the next step is going to be, you look to the people who are under the most pressure. And what's the kind of paradoxical about that is they're not the people that understand what the next step is the best. Mm-hmm. As a body or as like a field of particles, they are the particles that are going to aggressively probe the unknown with the most amount of kind of courage in quotes, because a lot of it is that they're running away fearfully from some negative, from some death result for the company or something, and so they start stumbling upon
you're talking about
indies
indie
in general.
studios?
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
compared to the establishment that came before it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're exploring all kinds of things, and yeah, some of them are absolute geniuses. They should teach classes in analyzing user bases, perhaps, but that's not even close to most of them. You know, most of them are, I want to make games. I don't have the means. I got to do something, and sometimes they find something special.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I feel like games, like chill games, right, as a genre, no one would have said that 10 years ago. They wouldn't even know what you're talking about.
I mean,
And now it's kind of, there's a lot of chill games out there.
oh yeah. There's a lo-fi beats game or like writing letters
Yeah.
game that came
Oh,
out.
and I love that game. Yeah, it's called what is it called? Kind Words or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines. It's one of those titles that's kind of hard if you don't already remember it. And yeah, I
I
think
just, one point I want to make about my history. Like back in the early days when I was working on those console games, back PS2 era and maybe PS2 Xbox era for the most noteworthy work, but all the way back to like 97 PC games, we definitely never thought to do anything other than design an experience that was the most adrenaline we could deliver as long as we could. And every time there was a break, like the idea of pacing, you know, like you think about like making a movie or something and how important it is to kind of cool anticipation and then expend it. We weren't thinking any of those thoughts. There was pacing because we just couldn't keep it up sometimes.
yeah. And yeah, I definitely want to respond to both Ramin and Tomo's point. And also, I looked at the game. It's Kind Words, Lo-Fi Chill Beats to Write To is the full title of that. And to start with Ramin's point about games being able to either relax or to elevate stress, this, I think, has been one of those... I think 2020 has been the year that kind of really put that to a test for a lot of people. And we saw, I think, for like the vast majority of people, that the positives of being able to play these games, like Animal Crossing, like for I think 2 to 3 month period, just blew up. Like nobody could stop talking about that game because it was the perfect low stress, low stakes game to play for a lot of those people. And when
as long as you ignore Tom.
Yeah. And it is, I think, a very interesting discussion, hey Soren, about this idea of playing a game where the goal isn't to kill everybody, where the goal isn't just to get to number 1 on the leaderboards, fight the giant monster. And I think, and then building that off to Tomo's point, if we were like describing some like the best and most interesting games that came out like in the last 10 years to people like 20, 30 years ago, they probably wouldn't believe us. You know, a game like Gone Home taking over the charts, Disco Elysium. Like, who could imagine like a game like Disco Elysium coming out? The one
They
that
probably couldn't even imagine Braid.
What was that?
I said if you go far in the back, they probably couldn't even imagine Braid.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like
Braid was
2000.
a bit of a splash when it came out.
Yeah,
What about what about the explosion of the dating sim genre on Steam?
Totally.
That didn't even exist a year ago. In fact, Steam probably wouldn't have even allowed those games a year ago. Now they're just the craze.
The whole like visual novels have evolved so much over the last 10 years. The game that like Shark and I have been looking at, Dyson Sphere program, that like this game just like it literally came out of nowhere. Like I remember I was just like casually mentioning it to Shark like for one of our shows, and like within like 2 weeks it blew up huge. And I think like the development team's like a 3 or 5 person studio.
Is it good?
A lot of work.
It's very interesting. It's got a lot of potential. It's kind of like a different slice of Factorio. So if you like the Factorio kind of gameplay, you know, this is like, you know, even more of that.
Yeah, they would kind of like describe it as Factorio meets Satisfactory on like a planetary annihilation sphere.
Yeah. That's good.
I would go, it's more like Factorio with a very, very different end game that lasts a long time.
like it way longer than Factorio's. Oh,
Yeah,
which is crazy.
yeah, it is.
Yep. And back to like Tomo's point about how indie developers are able to explore that space. I mean, again, we've said this many times over that the indie dev space blew up over the last 10 years. Like, so many of the games that I played, so many of the ones I'm sure everyone watching has enjoyed, have come from smaller developers being able to experiment. And as we've said, not trying to compete with the AAA space. Because there's no indie developer who, in their right mind, would say, I'm just going to build the next Call of Duty. You know, I can do that in a year, right?
Yeah, but there's plenty in their own mind that say that all the time.
And with like some of these games, I think this is another part of the positive side. So many developers, I think, have really like put their own personalities in these games to tell these stories. Stuff like Firewatch, again, Gone Home. I tried a little bit of Oxenfree a few days ago, and you wouldn't see people, I think, telling these personal stories in a AAA game. Like, it just is like kind of counterintuitive to that AAA process.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like AAA is, especially as time goes on, they just have no choice but to be risk averse, and so they can't try to find a new entire model for making a game experience. That's not what they're optimized for, right? They're optimized, and I don't think they have a problem with what they're optimized for.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they don't innovate, they iterate.
Yep.
I mean, they make Madden football number whatever they're up to now. Just make a new one every year.
Yeah, I think that, indies are risk averse too, but they're, it's in a different way. They're risk averse in the way that, AAA are risk averse in the way that, they're just trying to make more and more money kind of thing. Indies are trying to be different enough so they can stand out enough so they can actually break even and keep on making games.
Well, like an individual indie studio is probably as risk averse as any average risk aversion type of situation might be out there. But as like a body of developers, and sometimes be not intentionally so, they take crazy risks.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you kind of have to be able to stand out. It's their risk aversion is they have to take a risk, or else they get completely averted.
Well, I mean, how many AAA games come out a year now? Like just a dozen or something? I mean, and you've got thousands of indie developers, and they're all putting out tons of games. So it's almost like you see how like viruses, the more viruses you have, the more they tend to mutate and you get new variants. And it's the same thing with you get a whole bunch of these little developers trying every little thing they can. You get all these variants, and eventually you get a super strain maybe, and it becomes a hit.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's maybe the best analogy, but
and for example, like, right, a lot of viruses jumped from the roguelike genre and then started mass infecting large numbers of users.
Oh, why didn't you say like 2 months ago I was writing my book? That would have been like the perfect line to start my roguelike book with.
You just need a time travel machine now and go back in time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have one for you here in a couple of years. In my
put it in the prologue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like talking about like being able to kind of experiment in that space reminds me of what I've been looking at with horror. And like the horror genre for the AAA was pretty much like dead, but we could argue maybe 2014, 2015. Like no major studio was making those games. The last one would have been either Alien Isolation or The Evil Within. It was like the last like original big name at that time. And again, having the agility or the ability to pivot that way, really given indie devs a chance to explore a lot of these topics that will either be considered too, not viable enough for a commercial sense, or be considered, I think, too risque. And one of the big things I remember, one of the librarians asked me about this, has been more stories about LGBTQ plus people and being able to represent that community. And the independent space has capitalized on that and then some compared to AAA developers.
Especially in the dating sim genre.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and dating sim genre exploding and then influencing a lot of games that would just take some of its DNA, right? Like Kit Fox and what is it? Boyfriend Dungeon.
Boyfriend Dungeon, yeah.
And the whoever made Drew Daddy,
Dream
something
Daddy,
about dating,
something like
Dream
that.
Daddy. And I mean, these are high quality games, by the way, right? That's not like, oh, I made this throwaway idea that just happened to have a off the beaten path concept. It's like these are really serious efforts that bring together multiple genre feature sets and have great art. It's pretty interesting to watch in action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're seeing, I think, a lot more of that in terms of, like, to Ramin's point from earlier, that more of these kinds of like visual novel, like dating sim, like it feels like the dating sim genre is kind of like the new roguelike genre. Like roguelikes like 10, 15 years ago were, this very niche, nobody outside the super hardcore fan base knew about them. Then the roguelikes blew up, and now we're seeing kind of like the dating sim genre having that same kind of renaissance.
But if you had a roguelike dating sim where, every time you encounter the person, it's completely random, procedurally generated so that they're a different person every time.
There we
Got to
go.
get legacy bonuses. You got to get legacy bonuses because I love that feature.
Now, one thing I think to kind of switch gears and talk a little bit more about the negatives, I think there's two big topics that I want to bring over the roundtable. We'll start with kind of talking more about the social and monetization side that I know Ramin brought up earlier, and then we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the real life impact. I guess when it comes to the negative side, this is something that I know Ramin and we've spoken many times about. You've of course written plenty of talks about this and pieces on Gamma Sutra, and part of, I think, the negative role video games have been kind of exploiting human nature and the addictive qualities of these games.
Did you want me to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I just set you up to get going there.
Yeah,
Okay,
Sharky,
yeah.
100% assumed you'd start this one.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I mean, I've been trying to say, the industry should make a healthier games for quite a while. I've even written a paper on how to make healthier computer games and done some talks on that topic. And I've had a lot of very critical things to say about this whole dopamine chasing thing, where we're trying to get people into these Skinner box loops and get them addicted and get them to spend and fun pain, all these things that we do to aggravate our players, to try to force them to spend. And my approach in a lot of these things is if I think there's a better way, people are often like, well, show us or shut up. And I really want to do this right. So right now in my studio, we have more neuroscientists on our team than we have programmers, and we're in our first phase of development in our alpha. We're going to be trying to decide to figure out exactly what it is that makes people stressed or makes people relaxed or what makes people happy in a game. And our neuroscientists are actually going to be literally measuring this in real time using some very high-tech stuff. And then once we figure out how to optimize that to make players happy and connected and having feelings of friendship when they and connection to other players in the game, we're going to then move to beta with this. And I'm very excited because I'm hoping that this is going to be the, put up or shut up, where I'm showing other developers how we could do this, how we can make games that really make people feel good when they play, and counter all the stress that they're encountering these days. Because I think right now everyone's just playing follow the leader and saying, okay, let's do dopamine and gambling and gotcha and loot boxes and fun paint, whatever we can to try to stim our users into spending. But I think if you meet consumer needs more directly for what they really need, they'll give you money.
I feel like in the most generic sort of way, right, is engagement of any sort can be monetized. And so if you have enough time, if you've been able to capture the attention of a user for a sufficient long amount of time, that theoretically eventually any user will monetize. And now we're free. Now we're free to get there however we choose to. And yeah, we could do it the same way we've seen it done. And honestly, I don't disagree with people that do that, and that really you should start that way in a lot of ways, because you have so many examples to follow. Like if you want to start learning the ropes of kind of like, serving the needs of an audience, it's like, yeah, do what has been done before if you haven't done it yet. But once you're past that point, it's like, and you recognize the universality of that, you can approach it anyway. And I think that we'll probably see, an even more aggressive fracturing of different approaches to holding player attention and the types of rhythms of player attention and even magnitude, right? Because like the game we're working on at Hyperkinetic, to some extent has been designed to allow you to play another game at the same time. And so, that would have never made any sense at all in a conversation 10 years ago. And now I think I see lots of examples coming up where a second monitor game that's at a slow, careful pace totally never pressures you at all.
Yeah, I know I would personally like to see a fast change in all the free-to-play models out there, like because there's so many of them that take advantage of people, and some of them are people who are malicious and purposely trying to take advantage of people, and other people are indies that don't know any better. It's what they've always been used to, and it's what they've been trained on, kind of thing, by the upper people. So they follow it, or they just don't know any better. And it's like, hey, we need a free to play model. I don't know how to design one. Let's grab that one over there, kind of thing, and we'll adapt it to our uses. And I just really hate the way that it's been going and how almost all of them are abusive. There's a few out there that aren't, but you don't ever hear about those few, kind of thing, because most of you don't succeed, sadly. And that's one thing I'm doing on top of Ramin, and trying to foster a new seed into that thing that maybe we can prove there's a better way to do this that does not hurt the consumers, and people will adopt it, or adopt a version of it, or innovate in it, and become that indie virus in the free to play space.
Yeah, and like with a lot of the mobile games I've been trying out the last year, that you really have seen that difference in terms of design philosophy compared to 5 to 10 years ago, with kind of like the rise of King, Zynga, and so on. That they are trying to make these experiences more involved. That it's not just, here's a quick and dirty game, give us $10 a day kind of thing. But a lot of these games, I think, are still held to that monetization model. And that monetization model, at the end of the day, is still very much exploiting those needs of somebody. You have to play it every day. You need to do X amount of things. And if you don't do that, then you're going to fall behind and you're going to start losing. And I think part of this has been kind of this change in terms of what people expect out of video games. I think this is a question I want to ask everyone watching as well as our table. One of the things I think, especially for me with my playing style, is that I'm becoming more and more disinterested in super long games, in the sense that this is a game that has an 80-hour story, or if you want to experience this game even yet for the minor, it's going to be 30 hours. It's the kind of like the opposite of what I see from stuff like Disgaea and the Nipponichi games, where you can play them, 5-10 minutes at a time, put them away, go another 5-10 minutes. And I feel like for a lot of developers out there, they're still trying to chase that, time equals quality metric. So for everyone watching, what do you think about, I guess, the amount of investment it takes to play these games? Like, do you think that it is better for kind of like lower investment or lower time versus what we saw 20, 30 years ago?
Well, I think that players' time right now is more valuable than what it used to be, kind of thing. It used to be when, there was only 3 or 4 games for them to get every month, kind of thing. They had plenty of time. So, a long play time was better, kind of thing. But now with the thousands and thousands of indies, pumping out games, 30 plus games a day, kind of thing, plus the AAA on top of that, you have a different story to where players don't have enough time to play all these games. So I think that players more value a better experience over a long time. That being said, as I noticed that in my personal game habits, I tend to go back to the same, games all the time. Ones like 7 Days to Die, Oxygen Not Included, Factorio, and all these other games that have I just can keep on playing them, kind of thing forever. And it's not because I don't want to play the other games in my library. It's just that it's almost become like a home kind of thing, and where I feel comfortable there, therefore I want to spend more time there, kind of thing, rather than go experience something new or different. But I'm still open to new or different kind of thing to, see if I can find a new home to invest in, kind of thing. And I tend to really, sway to, spending a lot of time in a few games and not much time in other games.
I go, Roman?
Okay. I would say that I think that maybe in the past, these very immersive long stories were what people needed to decompress from all the time they had to spend with other humans. Now, whether they want to spend time with other humans or not, in large part they can't because of social isolation, even more than what we had before with gaming. And so I think what people are needing more than anything, and what they can get potentially in games, is social interaction. I think that if a player is forced to choose between social interaction and a gaming experience, that's going to be a tough decision for them. But if you can combine the two, then it's a win-win, because they could have their social interaction and the gaming experience. And I think this is really what's going to be next for people. They really need this. And I don't see AAA really figuring out how to go down this path at all, or even if they're even interested in going down this path. And I don't know if indie developers have the resources, because multiplayer games are more difficult to develop than a single player experience.
You can tell me that again.
What, even one hire that can accommodate like complex and sophisticated new approaches to kind of like network connectivity between players is usually outside the budget of your typical indie studio. Directly to the question of whether long or good is better, I don't think there is an answer to that other than it depends. But I think you can arrange all the users on a scale that tends to prefer less time per session and total time per game, and or more time per session and total time. I know that my personal inclination leans very heavily on these extremely long haul number of hours played types of games. Games like Hearts of Iron or Crusader Kings or Dwarf Fortress or I put a lot of hours into Steel Division 2. I know someone in the audience probably likes that one. But that's just my personal inclination. There's something what I like is for there to be sufficient complexity that even maybe years later, I'm still adding to my understanding of the game. And I find that really interesting. And that's kind of what I'm building too, because I like that idea. So it means I'm in a lot of ways, I'm building for a user that is a little bit more like me. And I know that may not be everybody, but those Paradox games sell pretty good for a reason. It's because there is an audience for them. I think the average meaty middle is probably a good deal less than that, though, in terms of optimal total hours, average total hours played.
Yeah, and I would agree with Ramin that we definitely need more good social games kind of thing, because we need that connection kind of thing in games as a total, but we need ones that do not take advantage of players, because if you have ones that take advantage of players in that situation, you're just going to foster a toxic community in which nobody wants to be social in.
Yeah, and pay to win is not social.
Nope.
Yeah.
Or what we talk about with having the whales team up against the guppies, and being so PvP focused that it just is, well, no pun intended, sharp becomes a feeding frenzy of people trying to kill each other to see who comes out on top.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're all
all
underdogs because I got it covered.
Yep, and to Rory's comment in chat, pull all mono games together, they are the same game. And we have seen that, again, with the focus of iteration on these titles. I mean, you look at stuff like Tomb Raider, Uncharted, Marvel's Avengers, Spider-Man, so on. They all feature very much like the same, basic DNA in them. And to Tomo's chat, yeah, I would agree with that. I think there was a renaissance of game design philosophy over the last 20 years that it has become, I think, a lot more enjoyable to play games these days than even some the more memorable ones of 30, 40 years ago. We all have our rose-tinted glasses for games like XCOM or Star Control 2, but those weren't exactly the most friendly games to actually sit down and play.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gaming back in the day was rough.
Mm.
I was actually just talking to my daughter about Super Ghouls and Ghosts on the Sega Genesis and trying to explain. And to be fair, what's interesting about her experience playing games recently is that she's been going through a number of Apple Arcade games. And some of those harken back to that kind of gameplay. But man, I could, in a single life, go all the way through Super Ghouls and Ghosts. And of course, if you beat it, you had to go back to the beginning and beat it again to get the last boss. One life all the way through. And all that music is just trapped in my head.
The best I got was some of the games from Loco Molito. I'm playing Curse Castilia, Super Hydora, and those kinds of games, more of the modern retro. We just finished a Cyber Shadow on stream 2 weeks ago, which is kind of modern Ninja Gaiden from the NES era. Let's go back to some Quake 1. In terms of our time, we're about 50 minutes. And I know we're shooting for, I would say, another 20, 30 minutes, give or take. There is one topic, again, the give or take is the major point there. But there is one big topic that I wanted to bring up for the roundtable. This will kind of inspire me to pitch this originally. And this is the idea of taboo topics when it comes to the game industry. And specifically what you can and cannot show. And the piece of news that kind of brought this along was the announcement that they were trying to bring back that 6 Days in Fallujah game. And this was announced, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago at the time of this recording. And when it comes to the game industry, or specifically to just broadly to entertainment in general, there are some, unspoken rules about what you can and can't show. Stuff like harm to minors, depicting, real-life religions in a extreme light, topics that would probably get this stream censored, or the YouTube algorithm to come down on me if I mention them here. And the game industry has had that is in a very unique position that with so much of the independent space really, they're not beholden to not only shareholders but to the ESRB and stuff like that to explore these topics, whether positively or negatively. So I guess the first part of this question I want to ask is, do you feel like there is still that, taboo sense when it comes to what can be depicted in a video game? Or do you think that things have softened up, or there is a right and wrong way of showing that?
Yeah, I mean, at least in the context of your specific example. Oh, by the way, I should hard stop around 50. So
like
that puts 24 minutes from now.
Oh, there's the give or take right there, so we're good.
But yeah, in the context of 6 Days in Fallujah, I was working on Medal of Honor 2010 at exactly that same time frame. And so we saw that news show up, and it was very unsettling. And sure, we were complaining. I mean, we were like, yucking it up that they were putting their foot in their mouths. But at some point, you see a studio trying their darndest, like deadly serious about like authentic and honorable depiction of soldiers in a real life conflict. This is Atomic Games we're talking about. We're talking about the Close Combat guys and the V for Victory guys from like way back when, and they have it in their heads they're gonna do this, and they're gonna do it right. And I think they get the rights to like 100 Marines, and they get like record their testimonials, and they get all these consultants, and then they also happen to get consultants that are Iraqi civilians and Iraqi soldiers. And next thing you know, the news says they're paying terrorists, and then a week later they're canceled. And we saw that, and we just our hearts, our stomachs sunk a little bit, because Medal of Honor 2010 is tries to be a very authentic. Realistic is not the right word to use. Probably wouldn't have been the right word to use for them either. But an authentic depiction of modern warfare, and both at a kind of a social level and to some extent a political level. And of course, we did everything we could to avoid the kinds of themes that maybe would be more controversial. And we tried harder to remove those themes after 6 Days got canceled. And even so, our multiplayer allowed you to play exactly the same type of people that you would play in Counter-Strike. But next thing you know, you have people like British Army, and they're very justified in being offended by this. But that doesn't mean it should stop what we do. But you have like British military offended that we have a level called Helmand Valley, and we have Allied forces fighting against not terrorist forces, but like Al Qaeda, Taliban type forces. And it's a hot topic. We weren't over it yet. We're still there fighting, and so it created a lot of controversy. My personal position on what's okay is really a lot broader than society's perspective. So it's like, what I think art forms should be free to try out what they try, and if people don't like it, they can talk as much crap about it as they want, and they shouldn't support it. Unfortunately, my publisher may not think the same way, and I say something wrong, and I'm fired.
Yeah. For me personally, I have a rather simple look at it. It's like, if I want to put it in my game and I feel justified, of course, I'm not going to put anything in a game that is, that I feel is going to affect people negatively. I'm trying to invoke a positive response for my game, not a negative one. But, if I want to make a game about, a war and show a point there to why, something about the war kind of thing, or I want to, make one about, racism, which was like my last one kind of thing. And, if I want to make a game about it, and, I'm going to do it. Of course, I'm not doing it haphazardly. I'm doing it in a way with the specific vision to, basically tell a story, or tell them, present a message to learn from, or to, take some kind of note away from it for your personal, something that would affect you for the rest of your life kind of thing. Just this extra point of view.
Do you have anything you want to add, Rami?
Well, I personally think there's enough games out there where people are rewarded for killing each other, or even more so, rewarded for shooting a person in the head. They get extra points for that or something. I think you become what you practice, and I think that there's a demand for entertainment that doesn't involve killing.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's a small niche. I mean, yeah. But I'd like to believe it's actually the majority, not the minority, that would want to play something like that. I mean, like Pokemon Go. I mean, you throw a ball at a creature, there's no violence.
Mm-hmm.
Very popular game. So for me, I mean, I'm even playing with something right now. It's very high tech. We don't even know if the world's ready for it, but something called connected rewards or connected gaming, where we literally will reward you for connecting neurologically to one of your teammates. Like you're in sync. You start to bond, and when that happens, your brainwaves like go in sync with the other player, and we can detect that. And by doing that, we can put on the screen you've connected to Sally and Emily have connected, and then they get a bonus, and they start accelerating faster through the game, and it can even affect the whole team that they're on. So we're actually rewarding people for making these types of human-to-human connections, and now we're at the point technologically where we can actually detect that. I think I'm hoping people will really find that exciting, and if they practice that, they'll get better at connecting to other people because they'll know when they've achieved that connection.
Mm-hmm. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it does.
Just one little thing to add. This reminds me of a conversation I was in recently, where we came to the conclusion that if you were to start describing games through the concept of a leaderboard, you have already inherently created a structure where an individual wants to be better than all the other individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now everything becomes a game of me getting more at the cost of everyone else. And so it's like our ecosystems are already built with that structure in mind. So if you want to turn that upside down, if you just started there and you then instead made a game whose leaderboards was, for example, the person that has given the most to the most people, and that's the only thing that gets measured, that change people's perspective. Then that's the beauty of a game too. You jump into that game space, you don't know what's going on yet, and you're gonna play ball until something upsets you or something is too boring or something doesn't make sense and you churn out. And so that's really a great environment to kind of accommodate a new set of rules. And I think that in particular, what's weird is it's not like people in real life don't often have like a success criteria that is one of mutual benefit with those around them. We have that on a team all the time, right? It just doesn't turn out, it turns out that that's just not what the big game is about. The big game is a leaderboard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, with Star Garden, we're hoping to create a game where the top players will be the ones that make the most friendship connections and have the most cooperative gameplay with their teammates.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like, bringing this back to, like, 6 Days in Fallujah and, like, this discussion, I think what you said there, Tomo, about, like, how things are represented is a very big point. It reminds me a lot of Spec Ops The Line, which is the other military game that tried to be, authentic or very graphically depicting what could have happened in that space. And how I think these things are shown is a very big element of this. And it gets at that heart of, is this showing this in a respected manner? Or is this being depicted as, glorifying or trying to gamify it? And it's very hard to walk that line for a lot of these games. It's why when a lot of people bring up that a game wants to be as realistic as possible, a lot of eyes start, rolling all the way to the back of their heads.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think in the specific case too, though, that guy who Tamke, I think he's maybe making some missteps in those interviews, and it's not helping the cause. I think additionally, if Spec Ops: The Line had someone who was going after them and published an article that showed just the most shocking part of the game, we're past statute limitations, right? So
Yeah.
if it's just showing the scene of you firing white phosphorus mortar rounds and then showing the image of the mother holding the child burnt to a crisp and said, like, is this what you want your kids playing? They would have had a big problem. It's just that nobody did that. I mean, you know, if nobody brought it up with 6 Days in Fallujah, they would have kept working on it and they would have shipped back then. Instead, if they could have controlled the narrative and instead like put videos of Marines talking about their experiences and how close they are with their squad mates, et cetera, and talking about their commitment to each other, and that filled all the airwaves, everyone would have a totally different perspective. I mean, public narrative is, as we've seen, especially over the course of 2020, it's something that you can play with, and the people that play with it better can do things. And it may not be strictly a matter of the exact thing that's actually happening in the game. I mean, I think 6 Days in Fallujah is a good example of that, because I think that for all the detractors, that the people making that game would do a better job of doing it right than any other team would have ever done it in the past. They just happen to be they have the right sentiment to make that game. And it may be challenging topics, but then you read the recent articles, and first thing that comes to mind is like, oh well, I guess these guys don't think the plight of the Iraqi civilian is important enough for anyone to care about. And it's just like, I'm sure the guy who was interviewed is just like, well, why is that what they have to say about what I said? But it happens, and it's hard to control the narrative.
And like, to build off of that, there's the other point, like we see like Ubisoft gets into trouble about that kind of narrative with their whole idea, like, we're not being political, but we're basing games in real life, modern day, showing real life events, but it's not political at all.
Yeah, nothing political.
And I think to Tomo's point about kind of like trying to control that narrative, like, again, this is one of the issues that we see a lot of developers struggle with when it comes to modern day or contemporary events. That it's very hard to say that we're just trying to tell a story or it's just trying to be emotional, when you can flip the script and show getting kill streaks and loot dropping from the sky and things like that, because World War II was full of loot boxes being rained down,
or loot flying out of a corpse after you blow something up.
Yeah.
That dragon really must eat in a lot of rich adventures.
It was a pinata. It wasn't a dragon. It wasn't a person. It was a pinata disguised as a person, dragon, or whatever thing it was.
Now I'm just imagining the whole world of games is just pinatas.
Yeah, now what we need is a game truly based around that, to where you just go around with a gun and you're shooting all these pinatas, and then when you kill them, they explode and drop a whole bunch of candy, and stuff goes flying.
And again, it's very hard to kind of like show these things or to be able to represent them in a video game. And I think it gets back to like kind of topic about why people play games. And I think this kind of builds off of what Ramin was saying earlier about, raising and lowering stress and, like the comfort of being able to play these games. That for some people, they don't want to see real life in their games. They don't want to be playing a game that takes place present day with you shooting people in the streets. There are people who want to play games where you can watch, the clouds roll by as you build a city. Like, the way I relax is playing very challenging games, stuff like Factorio, Dark Souls, and whatnot. But there are people who obviously find Dark Souls very stressful, because they don't want to play a game where you can turn a corner and someone just hits you in the head for 5,000 damage and kills you.
I find it fascinating though. Some people can find it non-stressful, right? Because it is so deterministic in a way. It has a lower average uncertainty than many games, and so for some it's like a meditation of sorts.
Trying to think if there's any other points to bring up. Again, we have about 10 minutes or so for the stream thereabout. Anything that we didn't touch on that any of you want to bring up as kind of like a final topic? And for the chat, if you have any questions for us on anything that we've spoken about, please get them in now. This will be last call for questions.
Well, kind of to round out what we've been talking about, and maybe more specifically talk directly into the negative side of things, at least in the context of 6 Days of Fallujah. There are obviously going to be certain topics that aren't a good call, and that the controversy and the backlash kind of socially is going to far exceed the magnitude of your results. And like, did Sharky mention or you mentioned, like, like harming minors? Like, nobody, you'll see it, and there'll always be a small slice of the audience that'll go like, oh, that's so shocking, I'm interested. But that'll only be a small percentage. Everyone else will just be like, wow, that's some terrible taste. And it is sad and unfortunate that maybe that also means that there are people who might have a rich, nuanced statement about said topic that won't get to say what they want to say. And that maybe that's not fair, but it seems also like, oh well, now's not the right time for that then.
Yeah. And I think you need to have that open space for people to tell the stories that, really push things forward. Again, like going back to something like Gone Home, that, 15 years ago, nobody would have thought to make a game with a story like that and have, dealing with relationships, same-sex relationships in that game. I'm reminded of that game that was like shadow banned, the show like the from China. I forget the name of it. With the Winnie the Pooh meme. Does anyone remember the name of that game that like ran all that controversy last year?
I don't remember it.
I don't remember the specific words.
I'm fascinated now. I didn't. I must have missed this.
I remember the news splash, and yeah, it was just like you said, Josh.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think if there's anything. Guys, we should probably try and end on a positive note, because oftentimes we end very depressingly for these discussions.
Well, I mean, I would love to share with you the obstacle that I'm having right now with Star Garden and see what you think, because we're at a nexus point here where we have this technology where you can literally play the game without even touching the computer. The computer can to some extent read your mind, and you can play it that way. It's like Matrix 0.1. But we're wondering whether gamers are even ready for that. Maybe they might see that as just a little too much. That they don't really want it when they, it looks sexy when you think about like playing the Matrix, whatever, being inside the Matrix. But if you had the choice, would you really want to be?
Yeah.
I think you would have to leave that as an option, because I think most people would not be ready for it, but the people who are will be completely enamored with it. But at the same time, the people who aren't ready for it are probably going to be completely turned off. So I would probably, see if I could figure out a way to do both at the same time to, allow people a choice to which direction they go in.
Yeah, and I think that also gets at what somebody wants to experience with a game, because I know there are a lot of games, especially in the mobile space, that people consider the second game, the game that they don't want to spend all their time on. Like, if they can just log on, tell the game, do my dailies, grind a quest, give my character the best gear, log off, yeah, do it like that. Just as there's people who want to play a game and just sit down and go, I have an hour, I'm going to dedicate my entire hour to this game, and then no more. Then the game doesn't exist for me for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I mean, right now the solution I'm advocating with my team is that we build 2 games. You know, one would be Star Garden, and the other one would be Super Star Garden. And Super Star Garden is like the Matrix 0.1. You're literally jacked into the game. And then the regular Star Garden just plays as a regular conventional game, but with the benefit of all the science that we've been doing to try to make the game make people feel happier and healthier when they play it.
Would there not be a
That
way
sounds
to
very
combine those
interesting.
into one?
I'm sorry, what was that, Shokri?
Would there not be a way to compile those into one game where you can just, I don't know, go into a setting or something and change it?
Well, I mean, it would have to be something you could activate, but there's always going to be somebody saying, well, maybe they've activated and they didn't tell us.
Mm. Yeah, that is true. That is very, very true.
And
Conspiracies will run about.
oh yes.
I think I'm inclined to agree with Sharky's statement about the right way to approach your conundrum. I mean, largely because part of the math of an audience, right, is that is there something about like what is the marginal difference between player expectation? You run into a whole host of difficulties and frictions, and especially if there's a lot of stuff in there that it kind of at its underlying structure are innovative things that you want to see, splash against an audience, then if something is just too stretched out, that it becomes something at least optional, I guess.
Can you be more specific? I'm not really sure if I know exactly what you're.
So like this idea that I would control the game without ever touching a keyboard, for example, right? That's so far removed from player expectation that will come with a lot of confusion and a lot of weird, unexpected questioning. And so if you're gonna go down that route, then you got to go down that route full bore. You're like, we are so different from the rest of everything. A key selling point for us is you're not going to touch the keyboard to control this experience. This is us. This is our identity, and we're going hard down that messaging path. But if there's a lot of other stuff that's also going on that you kind of like, because ultimately, right, it's like you're trying to do something innovative. There's probably lots of things that are innovative about what you're doing, and some of those things may very well benefit by wrapping them in a more conventional bubble to deploy the payload.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be an iterative process. We'll start with something that looks more conventional, and we'll slowly layer in these more advanced technologies to give people a chance to get used to the idea that this is even possible. And then if we do well enough, then we'll make enough money we can take this all the way.
Well, if you're doing games as a service or something like that, right?
Yes, sir.
So maybe what you do is the initial version you release is just 100% controlled, and then as you continue through your live service, then you add more and more of these features that build on top of that. You don't need to use a keyboard kind of thing.
Well, I mean, you could still use keyboards. Just there's certain things that you're doing that don't involve touching the computer. It's a combination of two of both.
Yeah, but I'm saying you could add those as you go forward. Come out with like the base with controls, and then here's this one part where now you need less controls. Here's this one part where you need less controls, and set options where you can turn that mode on or off when you're doing this, and have it be where the players that are with you already slowly get adapted, and you basically you slowly adapt them into this kind of thing to those that like it, and that way that when somebody new joins kind of thing, the players that are already there can explain why is it like this, and they can turn it off, and they can also it's really cool, so you should probably give it a go anyway because it's just awesome.
Yeah, I think your suggestion that we should have the option of doing it or not doing it is going to be key, and I also have the concern in arguing that we have to go down this path is that this technology has been put in, at least been shown to some of the largest companies in the world, and they don't know what to do with it yet, but they're going to figure it out, and I have concerns that the technology will be used in a way that's not consumer friendly. And I'd like to show how it could be used in a consumer friendly way, so that I can set a little bit of an example instead of just going dark side like so many other things that have happened in the gaming industry.
Well, then in the future timeline describes it as Ramin went in there and just convinced everybody that has had such good applications, which created a smoke screen for the dark evil to use in a bad way.
Whether I do it or not, there's going to be people trying to figure out how can we use this against people.
So true.
There's no way around it. This is truly Pandora's box, and we're in 10 years we won't even recognize the world we live in today.
Yep. So
not that we recognize even the year, today,
totally.
A year ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago was a far different place. Oh boy.
What was the word like 2 years ago?
I don't know. I remember it was like
Josh
2 months
said he
ago.
wanted to end on a positive note.
Yeah. And thank you for that, Tom, because that takes me to.
Well, maybe we should just talk about blowing up pinatas with a gun and having their the confetti blow out of them and tons of candy drop on the ground.
It reminds me how Viva Pinata took away some of the violence by using that theme.
Yeah. And thank you, Chris, for that. Remember shakes and all. That's a very uplifting comment. But I guess here's my final thoughts for our topic. I think this goes to what Yoku said a few minutes ago about the sentiment that games are for kids is disappearing. And I think ultimately that's kind of part of the reason for the positive role or the positive impact of games, that video games aren't considered toys anymore for a lot of people. They're not considered the thing you give to your child so that you can shut up for 8 to 10 hours. Video games.
Some people it is.
Yeah. But I think that audience or that segment is slowly going away as more people are being exposed to it. And like leaning back to what we said, leaning back to what we said earlier about the rise of independent space, that you have games now that can explore topics like sexuality, that can explore what it means to live in a particular period, or even get away from the acts of killing and violence. And we have, I think, this greater appreciation that video games are for everyone, whether, regardless of sex, gender, or even age these days. Like, there are stories, and we see this on stream or on Twitch, of, grandparents who can play games like Dark Souls and Fortnite probably better than some of us here. Like,
sounds like the Dark Souls of grandmothers.
There we go.
There's a player in my gaming group, might be watching this video right now. She's a grandma, and she's like one of the most feared players in this very hardcore game that I play, called Ways of History. And I've already told her I want her to be like a streamer for my game, because I want grandmas to see that they could just be coming in, just laying down the Doomhammer in my game.
Reminds me of those like advertisements in the 90s where they show like grandmothers and grandparents like playing like Doom or Quake, and they like have like the Mad Max look around them.
I think it would be perfect. I mean, it would go so viral.
Well, it's only noteworthy for now, because soon enough that'll be all of us.
But I guess to wrap up on, again, I think the positives have certainly outweighed the negatives. And it really is, I think, going to come down to developers, like I'm sure Ramin, Tomo, Sharky, and those watching, to kind of push the white hat side of what it means to make these video games for people to experience them.
Yeah, I think that's and I think it's really, what's interesting is I feel like it's very hard not to find a more universal good perspective the more work you put into making things for others, right? It's the very essence of what we do, is to serve. And then the more you do it, you start realizing what power you do have, and then you feel icky if you're responsible.
All right. So, does anyone have anything they want to say to end things with for tonight?
I just did mine.
I'm going to say what I usually say, which is, I probably said way too much.
And I
probably haven't joked enough.
All right. So, with that, as always, I'll give the roundtable one last chance to do any social media plugs, projects, anything like that. For myself, obviously, be sure to do the liking, subscribing, all that. We have our Discord channel. Sharky and I do live shows Thursday afternoons around 3:30, where we review indie game store pages, and our game dev show Sundays around 4:30, where we talk industry topics. Up to Tomo.
So we stream game development 3 times a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/Epic Tavern. And we do a lot of esoteric talking about video game design and theory and storytelling theory. And twice a week at our Discord channel, discord.gg/Epic Tavern, we have a live chat and talk about the development of the game as well. And sometimes game design and sometimes just storytelling in general. I hope to see any of you show up. It'd be great to chat with you guys. Again, thanks for having me, and it was great being here.
All right, Ramin.
My current studio is called Cloudwalker. We're building Star Garden. It's it's the first of a few games we have planned that will get increasingly immersive. We're about to go into fundraising. We've got the full backing and participation of Dr. Paul Zak, who's one of the world's top neuroscientists. We're very excited. We're ready to just completely change gaming forever.
And I run the studio Nexus Games. We do live streams on our Nexus Games YouTube channel, where we stream game development. We stream several podcasts with Josh. We do, several other things over there. And we, have our Discord where we, have a once a month dev chat where we talk about our current game, Neon Continuum, which may be the next, big thing. Hopefully. I'm hoping it will be. I'm hoping it will at least be the next thing that is big enough for us to continue making games. Let's put it that way. And it's a grid-based tactical RPG, tactical card game, CCG. And it's really interesting. And join the Discord or the YouTube to find out about that. All the links for, I think all of our stuff should be down in the description.
Yep. And I almost forgot my third book on roguelike design. I need to go back and add that line for Ramin earlier, Ramin and Tomo, is going to be due out in April, and I'm currently finishing up work on my fourth book on horror design. And we're still running the acknowledgement promotion that any donations of $15 or more will get you one. So if that is your dream to be immortalized in a book about horror design, you only have a few days left. But
so what is a rogue?
Well, you have to buy the book in April there to figure that one out. But if you have a topic for a future roundtable discussion that you would like to pitch us, leave that in the comments below or join one of our respective Discords and let us know. But that is going to do it. Hopefully for next month, Jack may have free time to join us again. But we will be back for another talk real soon. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where the art and science of games. Once again, thank you to our roundtable, and have a great night. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Josh.
Bye, guys.